James Cameron almost killed his cast. He pushed his crew to the breaking point. And he created one of the most punishing film shoots in Hollywood history. The Abyss wasn't just a movie about diving into the unknown. It became a real-life descent into madness. What was supposed to be a groundbreaking sci-fi thriller turned into a watery hell that left actors traumatized, a director obsessed, and an industry wondering if some visions are too dangerous to chase. Number 1. Before The Abyss ever had a script, it started as a teenage dream. James Cameron wrote a short story about deep-sea exploration when he was just 17 years old. The story featured underwater oil workers who encounter something otherworldly in the depths. Cameron held on to this concept for over a decade through his work on Piranha 2 and The Terminator. When he finally had the clout to make it after Aliens, he dusted off that old story. The irony? The dream project he'd been nurturing since high school would nearly destroy him and everyone involved. That teenage fantasy became a middle-aged nightmare that redefined what difficult shoot actually meant. Number 2. Cameron chose to film in an unfinished nuclear power plant. Not a set, not a water tank in Hollywood. An actual abandoned reactor facility in South Carolina. The containment vessel was 7 million gallons of water, 40 feet deep, and it had never been used for its original purpose. The production team had to filter and heat millions of gallons just to make it survivable. They built massive underwater sets at the bottom of this concrete tomb. Why would anyone choose this? Because Cameron wanted authentic pressure, authentic darkness, authentic claustrophobia. The twist? Filming in a real nuclear facility meant the cast was literally working inside what was designed to contain radioactive material. The psychological weight alone was crushing. Number 3. Ed Harris, the lead actor, didn't just act stressed. He actually broke down. During one particularly grueling underwater sequence, Harris ran out of air while filming. He signaled desperately to his safety diver, but there was confusion in the murky water. For terrifying seconds, Harris thought he might actually drown on a movie set. When he finally surfaced, he swam to the edge of the tank, climbed out, and sat there sobbing. He refused to speak to Cameron for months after filming wrapped. Harris later said it was the worst experience of his entire career. The man who would go on to play intense, tough characters in countless films was broken by The Abyss. Cameron's vision had literally pushed his star past the breaking point. Number 4. The cast and crew worked 6-day weeks, often 12 hours a day, underwater. Let that sink in. 12 hours submerged. They were breathing compressed air, dealing with pressure changes, and performing complex stunts in near-freezing water. Ear infections became epidemic on set. Several crew members suffered decompression sickness. One stuntman broke his ribs. The production medic was treating people constantly for hypothermia despite the heated water. Cameron himself admitted the shoot was the most difficult production I've ever been involved in. And this is the guy who later went to the actual bottom of the Mariana Trench. If Cameron calls it brutal, you know it was absolute hell. Number 5. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, who played Lindsay, had her own breaking moment. During the controversial drowning and resuscitation sequence, the scene required take after take after take. Mastrantonio was being repeatedly submerged, pulled up, having her chest pounded for fake CPR, screaming emotional lines while soaking wet and freezing. After one particularly brutal take, someone called cut, and the cameras had run out of film. They hadn't captured any of it. Mastrantonio reportedly screamed at Cameron, stormed off set, and refused to return for the rest of the day. She later described the experience as genuinely horrible. The irony? That drowning scene became one of the most powerful moments in the film, but it cost Mastrantonio a piece of her sanity. Number 6. Cameron developed a special diving rig that let actors actually breathe underwater. This wasn't movie magic with actors holding their breath. They used a real experimental liquid breathing system with oxygenated perfluorocarbon. The rat scene you see in the film? That rat is actually breathing liquid. It's not a trick. Cameron tested this technology because he wanted authentic reactions from his actors when they witnessed it. The problem? The fluid was incredibly uncomfortable, and breathing it felt like drowning even though it was technically keeping you alive. Several cast members refused to test it themselves. Only a few stunt performers were brave enough to try liquid breathing for real. Cameron's obsession with authenticity created something that looked fake because it was too real. Number 7. The production designer had to create an entire fictional submarine interior that could actually function underwater. Every switch had to work. Every hatch had to be sealed properly. The sets weren't just facades, they were functional underwater habitats. The construction cost was astronomical. The design team built full-scale working modules that were then submerged in that nuclear containment vessel. When filming ended, these incredibly expensive sets were simply abandoned at the bottom of the tank. Years later, divers exploring the facility found the rotting remains of the underwater rigs still sitting 40 feet down. Millions of dollars in set design left to rust in the dark. Cameron never looked back. Number 8. Cameron and his director of photography, Mikhail Salomon, had to invent new underwater lighting systems. Traditional film lighting doesn't work when you're 40 feet underwater. They needed lights that could survive the pressure, illuminate the massive sets, and still create the eerie atmosphere Cameron demanded. The lighting crew developed submersible rigs that had never been used in filmmaking before. Some lights weighed hundreds of pounds and required cranes to position underwater. The electrical challenges were nightmarish. They were running massive power cables into millions of gallons of water. One lighting failure could have electrocuted the entire cast. Yet somehow they made it work. The haunting blue glow that defines the film's look was the result of pure innovation born from impossible demands. Number 9. The studio. 20th Century Fox was terrified of the budget spiraling out of control, and they were right to worry. The Abyss eventually cost around $70 million, massive for 1989. Fox executives would show up on set, see actors training for hours just to prepare for a single shot, and panic. They watched Cameron obsess over details while the budget exploded. There were serious discussions about shutting down production entirely, but Cameron had Fox over a barrel. They'd already invested too much to walk away. The studio couldn't stop him, and Cameron knew it. He used that leverage to push even further. The relationship between Cameron and Fox became so toxic that he wouldn't work with them again until True Lies, 5 years later. Number 10. Michael Biehn, who plays the unstable Navy SEAL Coffee, was Cameron's good luck charm. Biehn had worked with Cameron on The Terminator and Aliens, but on The Abyss, their relationship fractured. Biehn's character required intense psychological breakdowns while performing underwater stunts. One sequence had Biehn in full dive gear, having a panic attack while submerged and trying to hit his marks. Biehn later said he felt abandoned by Cameron during the shoot, that the director was so focused on the technical achievements he forgot about the actor's well-being. The irony cuts deep. Cameron's loyal collaborator felt betrayed by the very ambition that had made their previous films great. After The Abyss, Biehn never worked with Cameron again except for a brief deleted scene in Terminator 2, number 11. The film's ending was completely gutted. Cameron shot an elaborate finale where the alien water creatures show humanity a vision. All the world's nuclear weapons simultaneously armed and pointed at their targets, teetering on the edge of global annihilation. It was a powerful anti-war statement, a message about humanity's self-destructive nature. But Fox demanded cuts. The film was already over 2.5 hours long. Test audiences were exhausted by the brutal pacing, so Cameron reluctantly trimmed this entire philosophical climax, leaving a much more ambiguous ending. What remains in the theatrical cut is emotionally satisfying, but thematically hollow compared to Cameron's original vision. Decades later, a special edition restored this footage, and suddenly the film's deeper meaning became clear. But if you think that was bad, wait until you hear what happened to the effects team. Number 12. Industrial Light and Magic created the first fully computer-generated character that looked like liquid. The water tentacle sequence, where a serpentine column of water explores the underwater station, was revolutionary. This was before Terminator 2, before Jurassic Park. ILM's team, led by Dennis Muren, had to write new software just to make water move realistically in 3 dimensions. They pioneered techniques that became industry standard for the next decade. But here's the cruel twist. Because the theatrical version was so heavily edited, audiences barely noticed this groundbreaking achievement. The sequence lasts just a few minutes and doesn't impact the main plot. Cameron's most technically innovative moment was relegated to a side story. The revolution happened in the margins. Number 13. The production nearly killed Cameron himself. The director was doing multiple deep dives per day, sometimes staying underwater for hours to personally direct shots. He suffered from exhaustion, decompression issues, and near hypothermia multiple times. During one dive, Cameron's regulator malfunctioned and he ran out of air. He had to make an emergency ascent from depth, exactly the kind of rapid decompression that can cause serious injury or death. Cameron survived, took a short break, and went back down the same day. His crew thought he was insane. His actors thought he had a death wish. But Cameron's logic was simple. He couldn't ask his cast to do anything he wouldn't do himself. That principle nearly killed him, but it also earned a certain grudging respect from the people, suffering alongside him. Number 14. The fake drowning scene required Mastrantonio to actually be submerged and pulled from the water over 20 times. Each take meant being dunked, having water forced into her nose and mouth, being dragged to the surface, and then having Ed Harris simulate violent CPR while she spat up water and screamed emotional dialogue. By the age of 15, Mastrantonio was legitimately traumatized. She wasn't acting distressed, she was actually distressed. Cameron kept pushing for one more take, one more angle. When the film was released, critics praised the scene's raw authenticity. They had no idea they were watching real suffering captured on camera. The performance worked because it wasn't entirely a performance anymore. That ethical line got very blurry underwater. Number 15. Cameron's marriage to producer Gail Ann Hurd ended during The Abyss. They had met on Terminator, married, and built a production partnership that seemed unstoppable, but the stress of The Abyss destroyed their relationship. Hurd was producing the film while their marriage collapsed in real time. They fought on set. They fought about the budget. They fought about Cameron's obsessive behavior. By the time filming wrapped, so was their marriage. Cameron later married Kathryn Bigelow. His then-wife appeared in one of his films, Linda Hamilton, who played Sarah Connor. The Abyss didn't just push the cast and crew to their limits, it detonated Cameron's personal life. His vision consumed everything, including his marriage. Number 16. The U.S. Navy and commercial diving consultants were brought in for authenticity. Real Navy SEALs trained the actors. Actual deep-sea saturation divers taught the crew proper procedures. Cameron wanted everything to look legitimate because he knew expert audiences would spot any mistakes. But here's the dark irony. The safety protocols Cameron learned from these experts, he then routinely violated them for the sake of dramatic shots. Consultants would recommend maximum dive times and mandatory surface intervals. Cameron would nod, thank them, and then ask his cast to stay down twice as long. The experts gave him the knowledge to keep people safe, and he weaponized that knowledge to push them further into danger. Number 17. Alan Silvestri composed the film's haunting score, creating an otherworldly soundscape that blended electronic and orchestral elements. Silvestri had to capture both the crushing pressure of the deep ocean and the wonder of alien contact. His music shifts from claustrophobic tension to ethereal beauty, often within the same scene. But during post-production, Cameron was so exhausted and mentally drained that he barely collaborated with Silvestri. The composer was essentially working alone, scoring a film whose director was too burnt out to give detailed feedback. Remarkably, Silvestri delivered one of his best scores with minimal input. The Abyss soundtrack stands as proof that sometimes creative isolation produces unexpected brilliance. Cameron's absence accidentally freed Silvestri to follow his own vision. Number 18. The film opened in August 1989 against stiff competition and received mixed reviews. Critics acknowledged the technical achievements but felt the story was thin. The characters were underdeveloped. The ending felt abrupt and unsatisfying because, of course, it had been gutted. After all that suffering, all that innovation, all that cost, The Abyss made about $90 million worldwide. It was profitable, but not the massive hit Fox expected. Cameron was devastated. His most personal, most punishing project had been met with a collective shrug. But he learned crucial lessons: better CGI integration, stronger narrative focus, and never film primarily underwater again. Those lessons directly led to Terminator 2's success 2 years later. Number 19. Despite the troubled production, The Abyss won the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. ILM's work was simply undeniable. That water tentacle sequence, brief as it was, represented such a massive leap forward that the Academy had no choice but to recognize it. Dennis Muren and his team took the stage knowing they'd accomplished something historic. But in the ILM offices, the effects artists remembered something else. The crushing deadlines, the impossible demands, the nights sleeping under their desks to meet Cameron's standards. They'd won an Oscar for work that had nearly broken them. The trophy was valid, but it didn't erase the memory of those brutal months rendering water that looked wet, liquid that moved like living sculpture. Number 20. Years after release, The Abyss developed a devoted cult following. Home video, particularly the special edition Laserdisc and later DVD, allowed audiences to discover Cameron's fuller vision. The restored ending suddenly made the film's themes clear. New generations of filmmakers cited The Abyss as inspiration, not just for its effects, but for its ambition. Guillermo del Toro has said it influenced The Shape of Water. Christopher Nolan studied its underwater cinematography for scenes in Inception. The film that seemed like a commercial disappointment became a masterclass in technical filmmaking. But here's the bitter truth. Cameron still can't watch The Abyss without remembering the suffering. For him, the film is haunted by the ghosts of a production that went too far. Number 21. Ed Harris and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio never worked with Cameron again. Both actors moved on to distinguished careers, but neither ever returned to Cameron's world. In interviews years later, they softened their criticisms, acknowledging the film's achievements while still maintaining it was a hellish experience. Harris has said he respects Cameron but could never put himself through that again. Mastrantonio rarely discusses the film at all. The silence speaks volumes. Cameron got his vision, but he lost his actors' trust. For a director who relies on intense performance, that's a steep price. His obsession captured something real on screen, but it burned every bridge behind him. Number 22. The abandoned nuclear power plant in South Carolina, where they filmed, was eventually dismantled. The massive containment vessel that held 7 million gallons of water, that became a character in the film itself, was drained and decommissioned. Today, there's almost no trace of what happened there. No plaque commemorating the most difficult film shoot of the 1980s, just an empty concrete structure that once held dreams and nightmares in equal measure. But Cameron's legacy from The Abyss extends far beyond that location. Every filmmaker who uses CGI water effects, every director who pushes cast and crew to extremes, every producer who argues about the line between vision and safety, they're all living in the shadow of The Abyss. Cameron didn't just make a movie. He redrew the boundaries of what filmmaking could demand from human beings. The Abyss stands as cinema's beautiful disaster, a film that achieved technical perfection at terrible human cost. It pioneered effects that changed movies forever, while traumatizing the people who brought it to life. Cameron's obsession gave us something unprecedented, but it's worth asking, what's the real price of genius? Drop a comment and tell us what legendary story we should explore next. Like and subscribe if you made it this far into the deep.